All right, guys, today's training webinar is going to be on the in-home presentation. Our in-home presentation, we have broken down into 10 steps. You could probably simplify this and combine a few, but I really just wanted to break it down into what I think are 10 separate steps, because in each step, when we do the in-home presentation, there's kind of a transitional phrase or transitions from each step going into the next. And that's why we have it broken down into 10 steps. So first, guys, we're going to be covering the bond and rapport, why you requested the info. We're going to cover the upfront contract, the pre-sale folder, which we call the free stuff, flip chart presentation, to application/health questions. Then we're going to roll into the 3-option close or 3-option worksheet. We're going to talk about completing the application, and then, of course, getting referrals, doing the initial survey, and then the cool down and what we call the cool down and the pushback at the very end. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into this thing and get rolling. We're first going to cover the bond and rapport. Guys, this is the initial, initially when you're coming into the home, this is where you're getting to know your client. And two things you want to do. You want to build bond and rapport, but you're also at the same time you're building trust, because inherently people will trust people that they like. So that's the whole purpose of the bond and rapport, is to find common background and common things with your client, because that builds the trust factor. And people are more likely to do business with someone if they like you, but your odds of doing business with someone probably go up 5 to 10 times if not only they like you, but they trust you. Does that make sense, Jimmy?
Sure does, Joe.
And there are, and normally the two kind of go in hand. Like, you can like somebody but not necessarily trust them, and you can trust somebody and not necessarily like them. But when you can get those two things going together and increase the increase your likability and the trust factor, man, you're taking your sales game to a whole new level, and your clients are a lot more likely to do business with you. And that's why we always talk about transparency, being upfront. Don't be a phony, be original, let people like you for who you are. This little acronym that you see here, CORE, that just stands at the acronym is CORE, and it's there to help you kind of jog your memory and give you some ideas of some things that you could talk about while you're in the home. So the first letter, C, would stand for children. That could be children or grandchildren. People love to talk about their kids, and especially our market, our demographic, the senior market. They love talking about those grandchildren and great grandchildren, right? So get engaged. Look for pictures on the wall. Maybe some of their grandchildren's artwork is on the refrigerator. Get involved and ask about children and grandchildren. The O stands for occupation. That means, what do they do for a living, or what did they used to do for a living? Ask them just some getting to know you kind of questions. Hey, Jimmy, out of curiosity, what kind of work did you used to do? Are you retired now, Jimmy, or are you still working? No, I'm retired. Oh, what kind of work did you used to do? Oh, good. Yeah, you used to be an engineer on a train. Oh man, get them to talk about it a little bit. That sounds like a really cool job. What did you like about it? Get them involved, get them talking about that. R stands for recreation. Recreation is, what do they like to do now that they're retired? Is it you know going to the senior center? Is it are they in a bridge club? Do they like going fishing? Do they whatever it is? Get them to talk about what do they do with their time now that they're retired. And then E stands for emotion. Emotion is asking like emotional type questions, getting them involved in why they actually, requested the information or filled out the form. So just a easy to remember acronym to help you engage in the initial bond and rapport. Jimmy, let me throw it over to you real quick to add any additional comments or extra things that you can tell agents to help them with the bond and rapport process.
Something that I do is I look for something that I can sincerely compliment them on. I don't want to, just BS or sound fake or insincere. So if I notice maybe they have a collection of some sort of I don't know, maybe figurines, or maybe they're into gardening, or if I just look for something that I can sincerely offer a compliment, I will. And then just listen. You don't have to ask very many open-ended questions to get them going, telling you about themselves. People love to talk about themselves. um, so just know that a couple little minor tips, particularly people that were born prior to 1945. That silent generation is what they're labeled as. They really connect with people by getting to know the other person. So they're kind of like the opposite of our generation that likes to talk about themselves. They want to know about you. So if you have somebody that is, born prior to 1945, you do want to ask them some questions about themselves. I think what you'll notice is they don't talk too much about themselves, but they're interested in learning about you. So those are the type of people you do want to tell them a little bit about yourself. If you have a wife or husband or children, just kind of, you don't have to spend all day on it, but you do want to let them know a little bit about you. The other thing I'll say is that the baby boomer generation, which is the majority of our clientele, they really connect with people over food. So many times they're going to offer you coffee or water, or some sort of pastry. I say accept it. That's just my personal thing. Accept what they offer you. That helps them connect with you. So with that, Joe, I'll turn it back over.
Yeah, very, very, very good. And you guys, you're doing this all in like conversation type style. So with the silent generation, you're asking them questions, um, and they're responding, and then it's okay for you to share information about yourself and incorporate that into the conversation. Um, just remember, it's always better to be interested rather than being interesting. So in most cases, you're going to be, um, you don't want to hog the conversation, telling them everything about your life story, but just be in tune with your client. So as we're engaging in this conversation, we really haven't talked about business much yet. Typically, what I like to do is I like to have like my clipboard. Or I have the lead sitting there. I'm going to ask a kind of a probing question, if you will, and let me update my screen here real quick. Jimmy, you see the lead card on the
I,
screen?
I sure do, Joe.
So guys, this is just a sample of one of the many lead cards that we do use. So in conversation, when we're getting to know the client, I'll just look at them and I'll say, hey, Bob and Mary, I have curiosity, when you sent this card in, um, I'll just tell you, I've been doing this for a long time, and we have, thousands of people every week that return this card. Most of the people that take the time to fill this card out tell me that their main concern is they just want to make sure is that when they do pass away, they're not leaving their family with a financial burden. Was that your concern? And just asking that question. Most of the time, they will come back and say, "Well, yes," or "No," or "Oh, I thought it was this," or whatever. But you're kind of laying that out up front to identify what their concern was. And what I will tell you is, if you phrase it like that, and then stay away from the word life insurance. As you notice, I didn't say hey, Jimmy, most of the clients that send this form in are interested in purchasing life insurance to cover their final expenses. Oh, this is life insurance? I didn't know it was life insurance. Um, so I'm not phrasing it that way. I'm stating the concern. Again, I'll say it one more time. And by the way, all this material that we're covering is in the magic formula. If you read it, we've got it written down. You can, read it back verbatim. But again, it's, Jimmy, I've been doing this for quite a while. Most of the people that return this card or send this back in tell me that their main concern is they just want to make sure is that when they do pass away, they're not leaving their family with a financial burden. Was that your concern? He's going to say 99% of the time, they're going to say yes. Now, at this point, if you want to take it one step further, you can go ahead and ask the three questions, which is, well, Jimmy, out of curiosity, I know you're concerned about not leaving a financial burden to your family. Um, Out of curiosity, did you send it in because you don't have any coverage in place now? Or do you maybe have some, but you need a little bit more? Or do you already have quite a bit of coverage, but you're looking to leave a special benefit to maybe your children, your grandchildren, or maybe your favorite charity? Which of those apply to you? And you're looking for so you're kind of taking it to that next level of finding out what the concern was. Um, Jimmy, do you want to add anything to this part of the training?
No, you're right on point, Joe.
Okay, so from there, and it's real, and just remember the key is like, don't make this sound canned, just incorporate it. I'm using my language, incorporate it into the words that you would normally use. I'm just telling you the way I do it. So it doesn't have to be verbatim, but just take the most important thing. It's not the words it's not necessarily the content of the words. It's how you say it. And you want to, get into it with a little bit of a emotion. So this is kind of getting into the emotional part of why they sent the card in, because they don't want to be a financial burden to their family. The next thing that we typically do, and I would recommend doing this, not all agents incorporate what we call the upfront contract or the full disclosure, but typically what I will do is once Jimmy, my client, says, "Yeah, Joe, yeah, I did send it in because I am concerned about this, and maybe identify that um, this client doesn't have any coverage at all." I'm going to ask the question, Jimmy, out of curiosity, do you know how these state regulated plans work? I promise you, 100% of the time, they will say no because they don't know how it works. So this is where you're going to do the upfront contract just to kind of lay out. And the purpose of the upfront contract is simply to lay out how the meeting is going to go. Because here's what I know personally. People are more likely to do business with you, and they will be more comfortable doing business with you if they know the process. Does that make sense? So I'm just going to read this verbatim as it is on the script. So Bob and Mary, do you know how these state regulated life insurance plans work? WFA stands wait for answer. They will always say no. Well, allow me to explain. So how this works is I'm actually a state licensed field underwriter, and it's my job today to help you get a program that you actually will qualify for. And I'm just required to ask you some basic health questions and review your medical history. This will help me understand what program best fits your unique situation. And then, Jimmy, after I know what program you're eligible to apply for, I'm simply going to lay out and show you what most people are doing in your situation. And if we can find a program that fits your needs, but probably more importantly, fits your budget, I'll send in a simple request for coverage. Usually I can get an answer back within the 3 to 5 business days. Does that sound fair enough to you? So I'm kind of laying everything out. There's different ways that you can um, say this. This is just happens to be one of them. Another way you can do it, well, Jimmy, how this works, first of all, let me explain to you, Jimmy. I do not work for an insurance company. I work for, my company is Senior Solutions. We're actually an insurance brokerage. And our job is to help you qualify for a plan that's going to offer you the best value. So kind of doing the same thing, but you're just kind of wording it a little bit different. But I recommend doing the upfront contract, and the reason why is because if you are going to get any objections, chances are you can get them out of the way right now. As an example, if your client says, well, Joe, just so you know, I'm not buying anything today. Okay, you can overcome that objection right then and there. As an example, if Jimmy says, well, just so you know, I'm not doing anything today. Oh, my rebuttal is going to, first of all, I'm going to agree with them. Never get confrontational with your client. I'm going to come back and I'm going to say, well, Jimmy, of course you're not doing anything today. Let me explain. I'm sorry. We can't get the cart before the horse. Jimmy, you can't purchase a coverage today, even if you wanted to. This is just the application process. My job today is just to find out exactly what you would be eligible to apply for. Fair enough? He's going to say, sure. Or if they say, well, listen, I'm not making any decisions until I talk to my kids. I understand, Jimmy. I agree with you 100%. In fact, you can't make a decision today anyway. This is truly just the application process to find out even possibly if you would qualify for. We won't know if you actually are approved, and we until we send in the request for coverage. Does that make sense, Jimmy? Anything you want to add to the upfront contract and maybe handling a few objections that you may get in the front?
I think you're doing great, Joe. You're good.
Yeah, you're too kind. Okay, so guys, we're moving on. We did the upfront contract. Just a real quick mention here. Just put this up here, new agent starter kit. Guys, you got to have these tools in order to be successful. So if you're new, if you haven't ordered this yet, make sure you order your new agent starter kit, because it's hard to be a professional if you don't look like a professional in the house. So, make sure you have the business card, you have your ID badge on you, you have the pre-sale folders. Let me just get my highlighter here real quick. Give me 1 second, guys. We're going to do this in, there you go. So when we go into the home, guys, we're utilizing this, what we call our pre-sale folder that we put everything in. Those you can order from the Senior Solutions office here. Just get in touch with me. So these are the key things that you're going to need in order to be successful in the field. This is the pre-sale folder that I'm talking about. This is what we put all the free stuff in. So let me go back here real quick. So once we do the upfront contract, now we're going to transition into the pre-sale folder. So this is how I'm going to transition into the pre-sale folder. So once I lay everything out, I explain how the process is going to go, and Jimmy nods his head and he says, "Yeah, that sounds fine. There's no objections I have to overcome." Well, Jimmy, before I go into all the guarantees of the state regulated program, I actually put together this special folder for you with some free benefits. Let me just take a couple of minutes and go over this information with you. Okay, so he's going to say, okay, I'm going to have my folder. I'm going to lay my folder out and I'm going to start going through some things. The purpose of the folder is to do a couple of things. We're building value, we're building trust, and we're building the bond and rapport. I'm not going right into my sales pitch. I want to educate my client first, and while I'm doing the educational process, I'm also doing a little bit of fact finding because I want to know if Jimmy has done any pre-planning before I go into my stuff. And this is going to help you overcome any objections down the road, like, well, I already have plenty of life insurance, as an example. So inside the sales folder, here are, and there's quite a few things we're going to cover. I'm just going to go through them one at a time. And I would say these are kind of in order in the way I do it. So I typically will have the free policy review form first in my folder. So I'll have like, so when I open up my folder, this is kind of the first thing that they see is the free policy review. Okay. And then so I let my clients know is that, Jimmy, part of my job is actually to review any coverage that you do have. And I just have this form. At this point, I haven't asked Jimmy if he actually has any life insurance yet. I'm just assuming that he does. So I'm going to kind of hold back on that question until I go over. And Jimmy, the reason why it's important for us to review any coverage that you may have currently is I've been doing this for a long time. I got to be honest with you. Most people don't know what kind of coverage they have. They don't know, and I have these listed. You can just read the form. They don't know if they have term life, whole life, universal life, accidental. They don't know if it's a level or a graded policy. And Jimmy, here are the things that you should know about your current policies. Number one is when will your policy expire? Also, when will your premiums go up and how much are they going to go up? Does my policy have any cash value? Will my policy ever lapse? What is my benefit amount? And then do I have any living benefits? And lastly, you want to make sure that your policy has these guarantees, that you're guaranteed that your premiums will never go up, never increase, the death benefit will never decrease, um, benefit guaranteed paid tax free, guaranteed never to be canceled due to your age, and also guaranteed to have cash accumulation. So, Jimmy, if you wouldn't mind, just take a minute and go grab your current policies, and we'll just do a quick review on them. Now, once you go through this, you see how I automatically assumed that Jimmy had coverage? Now, what will happen in this process, a lot of clients will stop you and say, well, I don't have any coverage. Oh, okay. Well, if you did, these are the things that would be important to you. Make sure um, if you ever decide to get life insurance, these are the questions that you want to have answered. And these five guarantees, never buy a policy that does not have these five guarantees. And then you can say something like this. And again, Jimmy, understand, I don't work for an insurance company, but I can help you apply for any of the state regulated plans that are currently available in the state of Texas. See what I'm doing? It's just those little things in the wording. Okay, so I'm either doing a policy review or I'm identifying whether or not Jimmy already has coverage or not without asking him technically. I didn't come out and say, Jimmy, by the way, do you currently have any life insurance in place? Yeah, I'm good. I'm good, but my coverage is good. Um, this will help you overcome that. And when you go through this, and if you go through it the way I'm going through it, Jimmy wants to know if his policy has any of these weaknesses. Jimmy, does that make sense?
It sure does, Joe. It
Okay.
also gives them a very good reason to go get their policy instead of them just saying no when you ask.
Exactly. Exactly. So just assume they have life insurance and review this form every single time. Now, what I want to do is we order these forms. If you don't have these, order this booklet from Mutual of Omaha. It's the My Wishes Record Keeper. You can get them for free. Here's the form number. You can call Mutual. They'll send you a whole bunch of them. We use these to, again, we're adding value to our clients, but we're also using these as a fact finder because we're going through here and I'm asking my clients. So, if Jimmy, can I just role play with you as an example? So, what I'll say to Jimmy, Jimmy, this booklet here, the My Wishes Record Keeper, this is to help you do some pre planning because when you pass away, there's two things that your family has to take care of. You have the financial part of actually paying for the services that you want, and then there's the emotional part. The My Wishes Record Keeper is to help your family with the emotional part so they know upon your passing exactly what it is that you want to have happen. Now, Jimmy, out of curiosity, have you done any pre-planning at all?
No, Joe, that's why I send in the card.
Okay. Let me ask you this. are you leaning more towards a traditional funeral, like with a burial and services, or are you leaning more towards something economical, like a simple cremation?
No, I want a burial.
Okay, full burial. Do you already have you already purchased the plot?
No, I sure haven't.
Okay. See, guys, these are like, if you can kind of just get the way, this is very non-confrontational. And if you're using this booklet and you're going through the booklet, I spend like 5 minutes on this little booklet. And then Jimmy, I know, if I could get you to talk about the peace of mind kit, because I know you use that and you actually tell, a little story about how you helped a client, right, with the
Correct.
purchase of a casket.
Right.
Let me flip it over to you, and then if you could talk about the peace of mind kit.
Okay. So when I pull out the peace of mind kit, I tell them, look, these are the 10 facts that funeral directors don't want you to know. Usually with that little statement, most people start nodding their head and start sometimes making comments about, I guess you can say practices of funeral homes and how they take your money. And I kind of like that because that's our competitor. But I'd let them come up with the negative stuff, right? So I flip it open. I'll say, now look, there's 10 really good tips here on how to save money. I want to tell you about one in particular. I have a client of mine and I use his last name. His name is Mr. Palomo. This is a true story. When I first met Mr. Palomo, his wife was already on her deathbed. She was dying from dementia, and she was there in his living room, and it was really sad. And he knew in his heart that it was, too late to get some coverage on her. But the reason why he mailed in the card because he was really interested in making sure he had enough coverage. Well, sure enough, about 30 days after our initial meeting, his wife passed away. And he remembered me talking to him about this. And he said, Mr. Hernandez, I only had a $3,000 life insurance policy on her. I am a military veteran. I'm a former Marine. And, we're going to bury her at the National Cemetery. And so, they picked up her body and they took her to the funeral home. And, I went over there to look at the caskets, and the least expensive casket, which was just a plain white metal casket, was $3,000, and the most expensive was about 10,000. And that's my whole check. I don't have money to cover the other, you know, services that they have to do, the embalming and the cosmetology and the cost of the memorial service and all that stuff. And he goes, "Is there another funeral home that you can recommend that maybe would be able to work with me?" And I just simply said, "You know what, Mr. Palomo, you may not need to change funeral homes. I know because in this tip is that you can buy the casket from another source because the state of Texas says they cannot make you use their own casket. So let me find out for you." So I simply just looked on my computer, I did a Google search, and I found three locations here in the San Antonio area that sell caskets directly to the public. I gave them the name and number of the address to the one that was nearest his home. His son took them over there, and he's such a sweet old man. If you remember the old Carol Burnett show, there was there was a skit where I think his name was Mr. Wiggins. He would shuffle his feet when he walked real slow. That's how Mr. Palomo walks, right? He was 81 years old. And so like he walks in there shuffling his feet, and he's a sweetheart. They fell in love with him, and he tells him his story, and the guy says, "Well, what funeral home are you working with?" And he tells him the name of it, and he says, "Well, we're the ones that sell the caskets to them. Describe that casket to me." And he does, and they have like a showroom, so he walks them right up to the same casket. Mr. Palomo says, "That's it. How much is it?" Keep in mind, they wanted $3,000 at the funeral home. This is a true story, y'all. They said $595. That's $2,400 savings. So then they fell in love with them and they said, you know what, you're really sweet, man. We're going to deliver it. The price includes delivery, so there's no extra cost. But we're also going to throw in the memorial cards for you. They were going to charge him $250 for that. So now, now he's saving $2,650. Now, he was able to keep his wife at the same funeral home with that $3,000 check. He had all the services taken care of. His son actually charged the casket on his credit card. His son took care of that, and they had everything done for the $3,000. And I tell that story. People love that story, and let me tell you, it builds like a bond with me, and it builds credibility. Now I got their attention. I got their rapport, I got their attention. And I tell that story for another reason, because sometimes you're working with folks that maybe they want a burial, but they cannot afford a $10,000 policy, but they see that there's some tips that can bring that cost down, so maybe they can get by with 5, 6, or even 7,000 and make it happen for themselves. And so kind of I tell it for a couple good reasons, but that's my story. Now if they tell me they're not interested in a burial, then I'll point out something else that to talk about that help them save some money on a cremation. So
Yeah,
but Joe,
especially if yeah, that's a great story because I tell your story all the time too. So, I mean, like like, hey, let me explain what has happened. So, guys, if you don't have your own story, it's okay to borrow someone else's. Tell Jimmy's story about the $3,000 casket for $500. It's an awesome story. And as far as direct cremation, there's tons of stuff that they can save, on doing direct cremation. But just taking your time through this process, again, this is like a continuation of the bond and rapport. This is where you're building trust with your client because you're providing them all this information, and you really, it's really important to get them engaged. Now, typically, what I will do is once I go through the memorial guide and the 10 facts brochure, I'll cover the Social Security form. I'll have that out there, and I'll point out to them that, Mr. and Mrs. Client, you probably are already aware of this, but did you know that Social Security actually provides a benefit of $255? And like I say it like it's a big thing, not like, oh, you're only going to get $255 from Social Security. Your family's. I say it like it's a positive. Like, did you know that Social Security actually give you $255? Most of them already know. Like, yeah, I know. It's like, and then let them poo poo on it about how little it is. Then we're going to go into the average funeral cost. Okay. I'll just explain to you some reasoning behind this average funeral cost. So when we transition from how much Social Security pays, Mr. and Mrs. Client, let me cover with you um, what the average funeral cost is based on the National Funeral Directors Association. Now, this survey was done back in 2009, and I go over this with them and let them know that average funeral cost to do a traditional burial is about $9,600, and that does not include miscellaneous charges like the marker, flowers, or the obituary. Now, most people will come back and tell me that it's more than that. Okay. It's better to have your average funeral cost be low than be high. Because if you were to have a sheet like this, it's kind of a I don't know, psychological, I guess. So if we were to do this based on, let's say, funeral costs in your area, a whole funeral, it may be $15,000. You know what I mean? But you don't know who you're showing this to. So if you adjusted this to inflation and had it at 15,000, that could almost be a negative because your client could come back and say, funerals don't cost $15,000. I got my sister buried for, 8,500. You see what I'm saying? But I think this price here is a little bit low. And most of the time, Jimmy, I don't know what your experience is, but when I show them 9,600, they usually tell me I'm low. Does that, are you finding that as well?
Yeah, and it's good that that you're underestimating rather than overestimating it.
Right. I think so too. And then I'm going to cover average cremation costs, and I'm going to let them know that this is a cremation that is um, this is a full service cremation with all expenses included. Okay, like this $5,900 is like at the very very top. Like this is like the Cadillac of cremations. Okay, in fact, I'll even tell them, Mr. and Mrs. Client, in some cases, you can do, if you're not interested in having a service or anything like that, you can get a direct cremation for probably as low as $1,500. That's where you go from the morgue to the funeral home to the crematory and get the ashes back. You can get that done very very cheaply. So keep in mind this 5,900. This is like the this is like the top notch cremation package right here, sparing no expenses, everything included. Anything you want to add, Jimmy, before we go on?
No, Joe, that's
All
good.
right. Yeah. And guys, we're going through all this stuff. Next, I covered the Social Security Administration, the future cost. Mr. and Mrs. Client, let me show you what estimated estimated future cost would be for funerals based on what Social Security Administration says. I just find, and again, I don't make a big deal about this. So if my client, let's say I'm dealing with a male, and let's say age 65, I'll highlight this underneath here. So a male age 65. Let's see, Jimmy, you're currently 65. According to Social Security, you should be on this planet another 16.7 years to almost the age of 82. They're estimating a traditional burial could be as much as 21,000. And that's it, guys. I'm leaving it like that. I'm not telling Jimmy, hey, this is how much life insurance you need. I'm just saying it very as a matter of factly, and I'm rolling past it. I'm not making a big deal about it whatsoever. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So then I go through this form very, very quickly without making a big deal about it. Now I'm going to roll into our asset gathering form. Guys, it's super important that you incorporate this into your um, uh, pre-sale folder. You incorporate this into your sales presentation. Now, how I'm going to phrase this is that, Jimmy, before we move any further, let me just find out if you would even need a program to cover your final expenses. Because let's face it, Jimmy, there's no reason to pay for something you don't need. Wouldn't you agree? He's going to say, of course, he's going to agree. And then we're simply just going to have this form. When I do mine double-sided. I don't have it two pieces of paper. I'm showing it's a two-sided form. So I'm just very going to quickly go through this. I already know the date. I already know his name, spouse, date of birth. I'm filling this in. You can find out current job, previous job, email address. I usually skip over that. Beneficiaries, very easy question to ask. Jimmy, who are your current beneficiaries? Or um, um, if we were to get you qualified for a plan, who would you want your beneficiaries to be? So you can get that, and then we're going to go into asset and liabilities. We're going to find about life insurance. Now, chances are, if we've already done the free review, we already know the answers to the life insurance question. So, Jimmy, we reviewed your policy. We've identified that you had, no life insurance. Oh, Jimmy, out of curiosity, did you have any? I know you don't have any personal policies, but do you have any policies currently through your work? I'm sorry, I forgot to ask you that.
No, I sure don't.
Okay, so no life insurance. Now I'm going to go over current retirement plans. So I'm going to ask about 401ks, 403bs, pension plans. I'm going to ask about those if there's any funds that are available in those. And then previous retirement account, kind of redundant here, guys, but the current would be meaning, are they currently participating in a plan? Previous means is it from an old employer? Now, most of our clients are, most of our clients that I find are not currently participating in a 401k. In other words, they're not currently making contributions to it. They're already past that. Okay. In some cases, they may be both. Um, and then you're going to find out about bank accounts, savings account, money market CDs, or maybe other monies under management. You want to add anything to this, Jimmy?
Um, let's say you're working with somebody that's, on Social Security. Maybe they're no longer working. Maybe they're just on disability. Well, probably if they're not on disability, they're not going to have a 401k previous. But you want to ask them, if they have any 401ks or retirement plans from any former employees or employers, that, if they were to pass away, that money would pass to their beneficiary. So that's a good way of finding out. Maybe they're sitting on something that, they haven't done anything with. It's been my experience. A lot of people, I'm going to say the average blue collar employee, they don't have the financial, I guess you can say, know-how or education. So because they don't know what to do with it, they don't do anything and they just sit on it. So it's just sitting there with whatever company originally had that 401k. It's just still sitting there. They never did anything with it, right? But it doesn't mean that they don't want to learn or don't want to be educated or don't want to have an opportunity, or so you just want to discover it first.
Yep. Now, typically what we say is when you're going over the asset gathering form, there's really only one objection that you would get, and that is, let's say, Jimmy, let's say hypothetically you're asking me these questions, and I say, well, Jimmy, why are you asking me these questions about my old 401k? Can you handle that objection?
Yeah, I just simply say, Joe, you may not even need any additional coverage, because what my job is to find out what accounts you have that have a beneficiary designation, because upon your passing, if you do have money set aside in a 401k, who's your beneficiary on that, and what would you say your estimate, approximate estimate value is, and that'll help us determine you may not even need this coverage. And so
Right.
they're like, oh, okay. And then so you kind of get that information. I will say you want to follow up with another question. So like, let's say once you identify that they have some liquid assets, maybe it doesn't really matter what it's in. Maybe it's in a 401k, or maybe it's in an IRA, or maybe it's in a bank account or a money market or a CD. It doesn't really matter where they have it, but once you identify that they do have it, there's a couple of really good questions that you want to ask. And so the first one is, what are you looking to do with this money? What are
Oh,
your
I
goals?
have slides for that, Jimmy.
Oh, okay. Am I premature, Joe, or is this a good time to go over that?
No, let me tighten up one thing,
Okay.
and then we'll go over the questions about that. So just to add to what Jimmy was saying about the beneficiary designated account, is just explain to your clients is that, because they may not be aware of this. So, Jimmy, you may not be aware of this, but when you have your 401k, or when you set up your investment, you named a beneficiary, correct? He's going to say yes. Well, if you were to pass, let's say tomorrow, as an example, that that account that you have would 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 convert into a death benefit with a beneficiary designation. That's why we're covering this, to identify whether or not maybe you don't even need a plan like this, what Jimmy said. And then this part down here too, Jimmy, is important too, is just identify what they're already receiving. And most people will be more than happy to tell you how much they're making. So if you have a client that is in their 60s, chances are they're already on SS or maybe they're getting Social Security benefit. And then I can just say, Jimmy, I'm assuming you're already collecting Social Security benefits. Is that correct? Right. And what is your monthly benefit, approximately? Okay, $1,800 or $800, whatever it is. And then, Jimmy, are you receiving any income from any other sources? Maybe like from a pension plan, an investment, or a trust fund? And just find out what the total the income is. And then let me get into I have your questions here, Jimmy. I have the discovery questions uh, up on here so everybody can see it.
Okay, great. So, the first one is, is this money something you're looking to take an income stream from to subsidize your other income streams for retirement? Or is this money that are you going to need, or how much, I would phrase it as, how much of this money are you going to need for liquidity, either for emergencies or to have access within the next 5 years, right? Uh, if you ask some of these good questions, you really, what you want to find out is, what do they plan to do with it? What are their goals? I mean, that's really what you want to get to, is like, are they still in the accumulation phase? Are they looking to draw an income, or are they looking to leave this as a legacy gift? Is this their emergency fund? So I mean, you kind of want to find out what their goals are, what they want to do with it. um, and then you don't want to do a presentation. You don't want to offer any solutions. You just want to discover the money and then give a really good follow-up question. So if they have money, for example, in a CD, on the second document there to the right, then you can say something. If there were a way to increase the yield on the money you have in the bank by 40% or more, with safety and guarantees, would it be worth 20 minutes of your time? And they're probably going to say yes. So you can kind of like reshape that, or ask that a slightly different way depending on where their money's at. But you're not wanting to use the word annuity, and you don't want to offer solutions. You just want to set it up for a follow-up appointment.
Very good. Very good. We'll move on. Just again, you want to identify the money. You want to find out what the purpose of the money is. You want to find out where it is. Um, is it in a 401k? Who's managing the money? Because when you get that asset gathering form, in order for us to to do a proposal for you, it's better to have all this information so we can do a proposal and do an illustration, so you can go back to your client and make the proposal and just have those 3 or 4 basic questions answered. And I promise you, you incorporate this form right here, you incorporate the asset gathering form, ask these questions that Jimmy is asking, and you can significantly increase your annual income by simply taking an extra 5 minutes, if that, in each presentation. And guys,
I'm sorry, Joe, go ahead.
yep, no, you go ahead.
One other question that you can ask them is, like, let's say you ask, well, who's managing the money? Where's it at? Let's say they say, I don't know, I don't want to use a name on the recorded webinar. Let's just say they use XYZ, firm, which is a recognizable brand name, right? Because it's usually a name we've all heard of. Somebody's managing their money, okay? And this XYZ financial company, they probably advertise on TV all the time. I ask them, well, are you happy with them? Are you happy with your advisor? And I've never had anybody say yes. Never. They always say either I don't even know who he is, or I don't know, I've never talked to them, or the company I'm working with, they only give me one phone call free annually. And then if I want additional help, then they're going to charge me a fee, right? And so they're not happy because they don't have the service. And you guys need to understand is that a lot of these big financial corporations, they have like minimum account values that determine whether or not they qualify for consultation. And a lot of it, it's a $500,000 or more, or in some cases, it's even $1 million or more. So that means if they have money that's under that threshold, they're not going to get a free consultation. They may be able to talk to customer service, but they're not going to really talk to an advisor. They may get one free phone call a year. They're not happy with that. And so this is where being personable and really coming through can make a difference. So again, this is only if they have the money, but this is going to help you get it. Go ahead, Joe.
Perfect. Guys, last two things that I cover with my clients is I'll typically do a free power of attorney for healthcare. Most clients don't have that set up. If you need a copy of this, I can get it to you, or you can probably Google it and get one that's approved in your state. I'm not going to take a lot of time on that. And then also in my presentation folder, I always have this rate sheet printed out for the Mutual of Omaha Children's Whole Life. And I just assume they have grandchildren, or they know somebody that has children between the ages of 0 and 17. And I just show them this. I just show them this sheet and just present it to them and just let them know. Jimmy, also, I just want to let you know, we also have great coverages through Mutual of Omaha, and it's our Children's Whole Life product. Look at this. Oh, out of curiosity, Jimmy, do you have any grandchildren? He's going to just role play with me. Jimmy, do you have any grandchildren between the ages of 0 and 17?
Yes, I sure do.
What are their ages?
I have one. She's 2 years old.
2 years old. Just Jimmy, just as an example, for that 2-year-old, you could do a $20,000 policy for just $7 a month, and that's locked in for life. And it has grows in cash value, and that $7 a month will never increase for the life of the policy. So
Wow.
I'm not trying to sell it. I'm just presenting it. A lot of people will say, "Well, I want that." Great. So we know at least we're walking out of something with something, but we're showing them the 10,000 through 50,000 benefits. So I promise you, if you just take the time if you just slow down a little bit, it's what I say. You gotta slow down to speed up. So if you slow down during the pre-sale folder and you go through all this stuff, it'll make the rest of your presentation go by a lot faster, because you've already done all the fact finding, you've already overcome all the objections, and you possibly have already made a sale by just showing them the children's whole life. So now we're done with our pre-sale folder. Now we're going to transition into the flip chart. And then so how I kind of transition to it, once I go through the pre-sale folder. Now, Jimmy, let me just take a minute and let me go over with you all the guarantees of these state regulated plans. And I have my flip chart. Now, typically what I will do is I will kind of tell a story, because this is the front cover of the flip chart that's just showing some of the carriers that we use. Guys, I don't know if this is the most updated one. There may be one that's newer. Just, it doesn't matter which flip chart you have and which carriers are listed. It's just the story that you're going to tell. And my story is this. Now, Jimmy, I think I maybe had mentioned this to you before, but just to let you know, I want you to know I don't work for an insurance company. Is that we're a state, our agency, Senior Solutions, we're actually a state licensed brokerage, and we're able to help you apply for any of the state regulated plans that are available out there. This is just an example of some of the companies that we do represent, and just Mutual of Omaha, Transamerica, Gerber, just kind of they'll see those. These are extremely recognizable names, especially Mutual of Omaha and Gerber. I'd say probably 50% of our clients have heard of Transamerica, but almost 100%, I promise you, 100% of them have either heard about these two. So you're building name recognition right there. From me telling that little story, is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to proceed with the flip chart. Expected benefit. What are final expenses? Guys, I'm just going to briefly go through this with the clients. Mr. and Mrs. Clients, as you are aware of, is that when we do pass away, unfortunately, the first thing we do is we create a financial burden for our family that has to be settled. And it doesn't matter if you want a full burial that's going to cost, 10,000, or you want a simple cremation for 2,000. There's going to be some type of funeral expenses that are going to have to be paid. That's what final expenses are. And oftentimes, even though we may want something very simple, there could be extra bills that may come along with it, like medical expenses, hospice care, renting one of those medical beds. There's extra things that can come along with that. So I'm very briefly just explaining what are um, final expenses. They may want to have something, they already may have a prepaid funeral, just as an example. But there's always something extra. Maybe they want their grandchild who lives in California to be able to fly in and attend that funeral. Just little things like that, and it just engaging in the conversation and just telling little things about different stories. Jimmy, I had a client that already had everything paid for, but they wanted to give an extra, 2,000 or 1,000 apiece to all of their grandchildren. They used it for that. Those are expenses. Why most people requested the information. Now, typically, by the time we get to this point, we've probably have already identified which one of these three. If you haven't, then this is the time to go over it. Now, Jimmy, I've been doing this for a long time. Most people tell me that there's one of three reasons why they wanted to get this information. One is that they don't have any protection in place and they're worried about leaving the large bill to their family. Two is they have some protection, like a traditional life policy, but feel they could use more. Third is they have plenty of protection, but want to leave a small benefit to a special person like a child, grandchild, a charity, or their church. Which one of these best applies to you? Now, typically when I've done this, I've already identified which one. So when I go through this, I'm just confirming which one it is. So in this case, Jimmy doesn't have any coverage. So I'm going, Jimmy, and I think you said, you had mentioned to me you don't have any coverage in place, correct? And you don't want to leave that financial burden to your family. Okay.
That's
So he would be this one. Now I'm going to go over the guarantees. Jimmy, the state regulated plans that I can help you with have 5 guarantees, 5 features necessary to secure a proper final expense coverage. One is Jimmy, we're going to promise you that we're going to find you affordable premiums that are guaranteed never to increase regardless of any changes to your age or health. And sometimes you may even want to add something other, like other plans, like through AARP or some of these other plans that do not have those guarantees. 2 is we're going to guarantee death benefit is guaranteed never to decrease regardless of your age, regardless of any changes of your age or your health. And if you have a story about that, you can tell a story about that. I have a story about that with my father had life insurance. When he passed away, he took out a policy back in the 80s. It was like a $60,000 policy. By the time he passed away, it was worth $2,500 because it was decreasing. So at age 78, it had decreased down to the minimum death benefit, which was $2,500. Death benefit death benefit paid guaranteed, income tax free to your family, which is important. Just letting your clients know is that if I deliver a check to your family for $10,000, I want you to know that Uncle Sam's not going to get a penny of this money. It's 100% tax free. It's guaranteed never to be canceled due to any changes to your age or health like other plans. Again, you can reference like an AARP policy that can be canceled due to your age. And lastly, guaranteed cash value that accumulates over time that can be used for emergencies or other financial needs. And then lastly, Jimmy, there's no medical exams. Now, how I reference this is that when I say there's no medical exams, I take it one step further. I said, Jimmy, that's actually why I'm here, is because these plans are state regulated and they don't require a medical exam. That's actually why I'm required to come out and meet with you, because I'm a state licensed field underwriter. And by simply asking you some simple health questions and finding out a little bit more about your medical history, I'm going to help get you qualified for the best plan available. Okay. Now, going on, there's two ways you can proceed. Okay. A couple of thought processes here. One is that you can end the presentation here, and you can go straight into the application and the qualification part, or you can go to the next slide. I'm okay either way. Jimmy, let me ask you a question. Where do you end your presentation? Do you end it here, or do you go ahead and do you cover this page, exploring your options for proper final expense planning?
I cover the next page.
Okay, so guys, Jimmy, let me allow you to cover this page, but we're just getting them an option. If you're getting, if you're feeling good and your client is like down with it and they're already giving you like, let me go back, sorry. They're already giving you buying signs like, yeah, I definitely need this, then you may want to skip the next page. But let's assume that you're gonna do the whole flip chart. So Jimmy, let me get you to cover this page exactly how you handle it.
Okay, great. And just gonna set this up a little bit. I cover this page to remove the objection that may come up about before they make a decision. They're going to also check into a prepaid or pre-need funeral home plan.
Perfect, perfect.
So by me covering this, I'm going to remove that objection. I'm not even going to hear it. So that's why I
Okay.
cover it. So the first thing I say, look, Joe, I want to cover exploring your options for proper final expense planning. The option number one is to do nothing. And I think you would agree that's not really an option. This is not about you, it's about your family. And you told me earlier the reason why you mailed them the card is you didn't want to leave them that financial burden. So I think you'd agree that's not an option for you, correct? Get their buy-in. You're right. Okay. Option number two is you can acquire a prepaid funeral plan. Now, Joe, simply the way this works, you can go to any funeral home of your choice. You can meet the funeral director. They're going to come out and they're going to give you a price list. Okay. And they're going to give you all their costs. Typically, they have them in packages. You pick the package that you want. Let's just assume it's the average. It's going to be about $10,000, okay, for your burial, and then maybe a couple of thousand more to cover the cost of the plot. So what they tell you up front sounds really good. They say, look, Joe, we're going to lock you into this price today. You're not going to have to worry about inflation. The price is never going to go up, and you're good to go. And so you're like, oh yeah, that sounds good. But the thing is, Joe, is that if you were to die before your balance is paid, well, then that balance becomes immediately due to your family. And knowing this, what they're going to do is they're also going to include some insurance anyway. So they're going to calculate the loan, and then they're going to also throw insurance on it in the event that you did die prematurely. The problem with that, Joe, is that the beneficiary is not going to be any of your family members. It's going to be the funeral home. So now what happens is the cost is typically on a burial about $250 to $300 a month. Now, I don't know about you, but most of the people that I work with say that doesn't fit within their budget. But let's just assume that it does. $300 a month, that's kind of pricing. You're typically going to have to pay that for 7 to 10 years. And so I kind of get a read on them. Most of the time they're not interested in that. Okay, so you get the read. If they are, I got a solution for you, right? So, but let's go on to option number three. So option number three is you can acquire a final expense plan. Ultimately, Joe, this is the best option. You see, because it's a whole life insurance. And when you pass away, the money goes directly to your beneficiary of your choice. So whoever you designated, they're going to get that money 100% tax free. Now that puts them in the position of buying power. They can go to any funeral home of their choice, negotiate the best price. But the best part, Joe, is that whatever money's left over, your family member, your beneficiary gets to keep that money, not the funeral home. These typically are going to be much less expensive than option number two. But let me ask you, Joe, which one makes the most sense for you?
Option three, Jimmy.
They always say number three. Okay,
Yep.
I shouldn't say always. I'm going to say like 98% of the time, they're probably going to say number three. Okay. Let's say the 2% that come back and just say, oh, I think number two sounds good. I'd rather just prepay it. I'm okay with the $300 a month. Just a quick tip here. That was on a $10,000 policy, right? Quote them a Transamerica 10 pay, double the death benefit, go with 20,000. You're going to come in at half the cost of that $300, and that's going to compete against that prepaid funeral plan.
Every time. Yep.
And
Yep.
then their beneficiary gets to keep the proceeds, not the funeral home, and it's paid up in 10 years. So that's my way around, if they do select number two. Again, I've only had maybe 3 or 4 people in the last 4 years pick number two, and then that's the way I solved the problem with a 10 pay. But everybody else, they're going to say option number three. Once you got their buy-in, going to the funeral home, that's out of the question. That's not no longer in their mind. I've had so many people tell me, I'm so glad you came. We were gonna look into that. Now I understand how it works. You saved me time. I don't have to do that. And that just gives me confirmation that if I didn't bring it up, that was probably going to be the reason why they needed to think it over. So I'll turn it
Yep.
back over to you, Joe.
All right, good. So guys, the next part is just transitioning in from the flip chart. Now we're going to transition into the application slash qualification. So once your client gives you the nod and the confirmation, like, yeah, number three is definitely the best part, you're automatically, what I would do is I would already kind of have an application handy. Um, Even if you're doing an electronic application, I still always like having a paper application out so I can transition into the health questions. And I typically just get right into it. So Jimmy says, yeah, I think the option three is great. Great, Jimmy. Let me just ask you some of the health questions. And then let me change my screen here real quick to show you. Just so you know, if you have a more recent updated flip chart, you may have this last page on here, the application process. You can use this if you want. Most agents will skip over it, but if you're relatively new and you want to use this page, you can. And let me just cover it real quick. So once Jimmy says, yeah, I think I want to do this. Well, Jimmy, let me just explain to you the application process. You can just use this chart. I'm going to ask you a few simple health questions. We're going to find a program with the maximum discounts. We're going to find a program that meets your needs and budget. Going to complete the request for coverage. We're going to do a phone interview if required. We're going to submit the application to the carrier. We're going to get a decision within 5 to 10 business days. That decision is either going to be approved, decline, or counteroffer. Receive policy by mail and accept the coverage. Okay, so this is kind of an optional thing depending on your comfort level. I typically do not use this page, but it's there if you want to use it to kind of explain to your client what we're going to do next. What I typically do is once I've completed, let me go back the other direction. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Once we've identified Jimmy wants to do this, I simply skip this page. I have my application out and I start right in with the health questions. Now, this is right out of the magic formula. This is the talking about application and health questions. I'm going to start right here. It says, now, Mary, I know this question may seem silly, but I'm required to ask you, do you currently reside in a nursing home? Okay, now, if you look at the Transamerica application, let me magnify this. right here. As you can see, question 1 is the proposed insured hospitalized, bedridden, residing in a nursing home or assisted living, uh, nursing home, assisted or long-term care facility receiving hospice or home health care. You can read that whole question. I'm just going to ask the question, Jimmy, I know this question may seem silly, but I'm required to ask, do you currently reside in a nursing home? And usually you're going to get a little chuckle out of your client. Um, from there, I'm going to transition and I still have my application, but I'm going to go through the major health questions. And this is the questions right here. This is how I do it. So from there, once Jimmy says, well, no, I don't, I'm not in a nursing home. I'm here. I said, Jimmy, I know, I'm just required to ask you that. But what about in the last 5 years, Jimmy? Have you had any serious health issues like a heart attack, stroke, or cancer? And I'm going to find out those questions. And I usually go back, I want to go back 5 years typically. Even though with most of our carriers, they only have a 2-year look back, I'm going to ask, I'm going to go back 5 years. Well, Jimmy, that's good to hear that you haven't had any major health issues. Are you currently being treated for diabetes or any type of lung disease that requires for you to use an inhaler or oxygen? Let's assume that he says no. Well, what about in the last 5 years? Have you had any surgeries or procedures, or have you been in the hospital in the last 5 years? He says no. Well, Jimmy, let me ask you this question. What conditions are you currently taking medications for? And this is where I want Jimmy to get his medications, and I want to start going through them. And let's just assume that he's just taking the normal stuff. He's taking, high cholesterol, high blood pressure. I mean, those are the ones that almost all of our clients are taking those medications. So I just want to ask about, is your blood pressure under control? How's your cholesterol? I'm not just going to skim over it. I want to do a thorough job of being a good field underwriter. And then also I'm going to ask, so in this situation, Jimmy seems to be pretty healthy. Okay, he's just taken some very minor medications. Well, Jimmy, are there any medications that you have stopped taking within the last 5 years that maybe your doctor had you on that you're not currently taking now, other than like antibiotics? So I'm going to find out if maybe he was on a medication, because remember, our carriers are going to look back and they're going to do a prescription history on previous medications as well. And then, Jimmy, is that your phone ringing?
It's my computer ringing. I'm sorry, Joe. I don't know how to stop that. I get that from time to time, and I don't know where it comes
It
from.
must be an alarm set for something.
Oh, could be.
Yeah, it must be telling you that we're over. We've exceeded our time on the webinar. But I told you guys, man, I don't know how long this is going to take, but we're going to do a thorough job. So we're going to keep going through this. Um, And then I ask, do you have any medical conditions that we didn't name? And then have you used any tobacco products in the last 12 months? Now, assuming Jimmy did have some medications, let's say he did say, well, yeah, I do have diabetes, then there's a whole like drill down that I'm going to do on the diabetes. Oh, okay. So Jimmy, what are you currently taking for your diabetes? Let's just say it's metformin, no insulin. Oh, and then Jimmy, when were you first diagnosed with diabetes? Do you recall how old you were? And so because I'm again, why am I asking these questions? I'm identifying whether or not what product he's going to be the best candidate for. So let's say well, yeah, I mean, I've been diabetic for 20 years. Okay, so you were probably in your mid 40s then, like 45, 46? Yeah, that sounds about right. Okay. And then have you ever had any complications due to your diabetes? Like insulin shock, diabetic coma, neuropathy? No, my diabetes is under control. And then have you always been on pills, Jimmy, or have you ever been on insulin for your diabetes? Occasionally, you will find people that were initially on insulin and then switched to pills later. So you just want to make sure, because if I got a client and I just ask them, well, what are you taking for your diet? Oh, I'm just on pills. Then I find out they were just taking off insulin 6 months ago, and I don't drill down on those questions. I submit it to Transamerica as preferred, and it comes back insulin use 6 months ago. That's on me because I didn't do a very good job on the field underwriting. Jimmy, is there anything you want to add on the drill down questions or any tips on this part of the application process, or the we call this like the qualification part?
No, you're doing great, Joe.
Okay. And then also what I probably will do is I will, as I'm going through these questions, I'm marking them down on the application, and I'm not going to get into like the banking information, that sort of thing, but I may ask about like beneficiary. Like, Jimmy, out of curiosity, who would you want your beneficiary on a program like this to be? Just to take it one step further. Now, from here, once I've identified exactly what Jimmy's going to qualify for, then I'm going to transition into our three option close. Let me get that up here. Okay, so now before I get into three option close, here's what I'm going to say to Jimmy. Okay, I'm going to say now, once I've identified, now Jimmy, um, once I've identified any health conditions, then I'm simply going to say to him, Jimmy, let me go over what most people are doing in your situation. I got a really good idea of what we can get you approved for. But Jimmy, you got to promise me something, and that is, if what I'm showing you does not fit your needs, more importantly, it doesn't fit your budget, will you promise me that you'll let me know? Because we can make adjustments and we can customize a program to fit your exact needs and budget. And wouldn't you agree, at least getting some coverage in place would be better than not having anything at all? And I'm going to wait, and Jimmy, you're going to respond to that question, correct?
Correct.
Okay, from there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my three option worksheet. I'm just going to show you the way I do it and the way I recommend that you do it. Now, in this example, I'm working with Bob, who's age 65, non-tobacco, and because of his health conditions, I've determined Transamerica just happened to be the best fit. So the options and the rates I'm using are based on Transamerica's rates. As an example, if you determine Americo, Liberty Bankers, Mutual of Omaha, or maybe they have to go guaranteed issue, doesn't matter. That's what you're going to use, but you're always going to make option one is going to be the maximum benefit. So once I got Jimmy to confirm with me that he's going to let me know if what I'm showing him doesn't fit his budget, on option one, I'm just going to simply say, now, Jimmy, I am required to show you what the maximum benefit is allowed under these state regulated programs. And based on your age and health, the maximum benefit that you could get approved for would be $40,000 that would cover you for your natural passing. But in addition to that, it would cover you 80,000 for an accidental passing. So if it was a car accident, or if you fell off a ladder, anything that would be ruled, Jimmy, as an accidental death, that benefit is actually going to double. Okay. Now, this program is also going to qualify you for a nursing home benefit that you can accelerate your benefit if you have to go into a nursing home, or it's going to be permanent confinement. Also comes with terminal illness rider. Jimmy, these are actually living benefits. So guys, I'm going to kind of go into details and kind of explain what the living benefit details are. Jimmy, a terminal illness would be any illness where a licensed physician has stated that your life expectancy is less than 12 months. You're actually allowed to accelerate your death benefit and get a portion of that death benefit um, pulled out while you're still living. Jimmy, these are living benefits. It gives you access to the money before you die. And then if you want, you can also cover, now again, remember, Jimmy, these are the benefits. Benefits are paid tax-free, uh, builds cash value, guaranteed benefits never to decrease, guaranteed non-cancelable, and premiums can never increase. Now, at this point, guys, I am not listing the monthly benefit here. I'm not listing how much it is. I'm only showing the coverage amount. Okay. Then I'm going to go option 2. Now, Jimmy, option 2, if you may recall, when we're talking about what Social Security future cost is, based on your age, Social Security estimates average funeral costs could be as much as 21,000, 20 years from now. So that would be 21,000 for natural passing. That would increase to 42,000 for accidental passing. Then again, you can, same benefits here. Option 3 is what we've determined what today's costs are, because through my fact-finding process, going through all the pre-sale folder, Jimmy has already told me that he wants a traditional burial, and he has communicated with me through his own experiences that he knows the cost of funerals in his area is around 12 grand. So that's how I've identified the 12 grand. Now, assuming that the client says, I just want a cheap, they're on a low budget, they just want something simple, maybe you can lower that. But in this example, this is what I'm showing. $12,000 for natural passing, 24,000 for accidental. Okay. Now, once I've laid out all the benefits here, the face amounts, now I'm going to go through and I'm going to lay out what the pricing is. I'm either calculating it as we're doing it, or I've already pre-calculated it. So in this example, I'm assuming that I'm calculating as we go. So I got my little rate calculator. Guys, you can do this so quickly. So Jimmy, for option number 1, for the maximum benefit, what you would need to set aside on a monthly basis is $229. I'm not making a big deal about it. I'm just presenting it. I'm going to show them that. Option 2, I'm going to calculate that real quick. Option 2, Jimmy, for the 21,000, you would need to set aside $121.94. And then option 3 is $71.18. Jimmy, which of these works best for you? And
Option 2.
Option 2. Okay. So he picks option 2. He can do the $121 a month. Guys, it's as easy as that. Okay. Now, there's only really 2 answers he can give you, is that either he picks option 1, 2, or 3, or he comes back and he says, none of these really fit my budget. So Jimmy, what do we do in a situation where the client says, well, I can't afford $71. I can tell you what I do, is I simply ask Jimmy, well, Jimmy, out of curiosity, what did you expect a program like this to cost? And then usually he's going to reveal the budget, right, Jimmy?
That's right.
He's going to come back and say, I was hoping to be around $50 a month. Great. So then I can flip this sheet over and I can just show him a benefit. If he tells me I can afford $50 a month, I'm going to show him a program for maybe $46 a month, maybe $47 a month, and show him there. Well, Jimmy, for just $47 a month, you can do a program for maybe it's $8,000. Okay, he's either going to say yes, I go for that, or he may say, well, what does $60 a month get me? You see what I mean? The point of doing the 3-option worksheet is that you want the only objection for them not making a decision is to be about the money, because that's the easiest objection to overcome. The hardest objection to overcome is the obscure objection like, well, I want to think about it, or I need to talk to my kids, or I want to shop around. And if we've done our job properly, we've already gotten all those other objections out of the way. So the only objection that I want Jimmy to have is that I want it to be about the money. Because I already got Jimmy to agree with me is that having some coverage in place would be better than not having anything at all. And he's already agreed with me is that if what I'm showing him doesn't fit his budget, he's going to let me know. So we have that bond there. How else would you handle that, Jimmy, if I came back to you and I said, well, I don't know. Let me think about it. I was really, thinking this was going to be a lot less.
I'd say, well, I'd start with the question you asked is how much did you think this would cost? And then if they don't want to give me an answer, I'd say, a lot of times I work with people, we customize it to their budget. Does $1 a day comfortably fit in your budget, or maybe even 50 cents a day, Joe? I mean, you tell me how much a day you think comfortably would fit in your budget, and just kind of, if it comes back and says $1 a day, that's $30, right? Then you want to
Mhm.
quote it at $27.
Right. So the point is, guys, this is just the three option worksheet. The whole purpose of it is um, to change the conversation to being about the money. Because I promise you, if they want to think about it, it's because of the money. If they want to talk to their kids, they don't want to talk to their kids. It's about the money. And that's why we want the conversation to be all about the money. So from here, let's just assume that Jimmy closed pretty easy. He goes option two, 121. Then I just want to all I want to do from here is just tighten up my application. So I want to go back to my application again. Jimmy, you said you wanted your daughter to be your beneficiary. Is that correct?
Correct.
I want to make sure I have all that, and then I want to go over the banking information. Jimmy, I'm assuming this 121, you probably wanted that coordinated about the time when you get your Social Security. Is that correct?
Correct.
He's going to say, yeah. And do you get that on the first or the third? When do you get your Social Security?
On the first.
On the first. So, guys, I want to make sure that I'm filling that out. That we're gonna draft the money on the first of the month. That would fill in the date here. Always coordinated on the day that they get their Social Security. If he says I get it on the third, but I don't want the money to come out until the fifth, that's a big mistake. Money will be gone. Make sure you always coordinate it on the date that they get it. Typically, it's either the first, the third, or it's the second, third, or fourth Wednesday of the month. Okay, if it's the second, third, fourth Wednesday of the month, make sure that some carriers have a special form that you need to fill out. Make sure you're filling out the proper form. But almost, I would say, Jimmy, doesn't like pretty much every carrier we have allows you to do it on a specific day of the month, right? Second,
I,
third, or fourth Wednesday.
I I know that Moo in Transamerica does. I'm not sure about Liberty. I'm not sure about the other carriers.
Yeah, I think Liberty. I think most of them do, guys. So make sure that you're getting that. And then banking information. I'm gonna ask just simply, Jimmy, out of curiosity, who do you currently bank with? So he's gonna tell me whoever it is, Jimmy. And then Jimmy, you have a nice little technique. Explain your technique on how you get them to give up the account number and routing number. I like the way you do it.
Well, I fill out the draft dates, and I go over it with them, and then I just get them to sign it, and then I ask them to give me a check, a voided check, and then
Okay.
I just fill it in later. If they don't have a check, then you just start digging. Well, do you go ahead and put your account number in there? To be honest with you, most people know their account number by heart. So if they don't, then I ask them to get it. Remember, you're at their house, right? So they can go get a bank statement. They can, most banks give them a little paper card that goes in their wallet.
Yep.
Uh, so I mean, there's different ways, but you just remember, you're in their home, so there shouldn't be. I'll have to get that back to you later. If there is, uh, then really it's just a stall. It's not really that they can't find their account number.
Yeah. Here's what here's what I will personally tell you is that if, and this is for new agents, the experienced agents already know this. This is for the rookie agents. If you leave the house without their account information, your deal is 99.99999% dead. You will never get the banking information unless you get it up front. There's something that's keeping them from giving it to you. Um, at least me personally, my success rate of if I leave the house without the account number, in my professional opinion, it's a dead deal.
Yep.
So we want to get this tightened up, make sure we get all the signatures. Guys, if you're doing an e-application, there's nothing wrong with just getting the paper app done and then, open up your app and go ahead and um, getting everything, transfer everything over while you're there into the e-application process. So guys, moving along, we're going to complete the application. Once we've completed the application and we make sure we got all the banking information, we've got all the signatures done. Now we're moving into, we're almost done. But before we leave, we're going to do the ERS and the initial survey. And this is just a part of getting the referral. So once we're all done, this is kind of the beginning of kind of the cool down and pushback part of it. So how I'm going to do it at the end is once we're done with the um, application, I'm just going to say to my client, Jimmy, Jimmy, now that we've got all this done, let me explain to you something, the most important part of my job. The reason why you're taking out this program, the reason why we're applying for this program is because you want to make sure is that when you pass away, that your family's not left with a financial burden, correct? It's
That is
my
correct.
it's my job as your agent to make sure is that when tragedy strikes, either when you pass away or if you get diagnosed with a terminal illness or you have to go into a nursing home, it's my job as your agent to make sure that your family gets paid the benefit as quickly as possible. But unfortunately, sometimes a client will take out a policy and the proceeds are delayed. And it's not because the insurance company doesn't want to pay the death benefit or pay out the living benefits. It's because either the client was tied up, deathly ill in the hospital, or they passed away, and nobody ever notified me or notified the insurance company that there was a tragedy. So what we've done is we've developed a program. It's called the Emergency Response System, and it's a list of people that care, that you love, people that love you, and people that care about you, that will just take the time to notify me if something were to happen. So, Jimmy, who's the first person that you'd like to put on your emergency response system? And then another way you could preface this is that, Jimmy, we usually ask for at least 10 people. And the reason why is because chances are I may not be able to get a hold of everybody. And of the people I do get a hold of, maybe only about half of them, maybe one or two will actually take the time or keep my name and number to contact me. So this is just a way to kind of preface it to be able to get more names. So again, once I kind of go through that, I'm going to explain why we're doing the emergency response benefit or response system, the reason for it. Then I'm going to simply look at Jimmy. Jimmy, who's the first person you like to name as your emergency contact? And I'm just going to start taking out the names. If they're having trouble, help jog their memory. Help get them to. All these seniors have cell phones, or sometimes they have diaries, the old-fashioned with the list of names and numbers, and get them to go through, people that they love and that they care about. Preferably, try to get people that are local. So basically, what I do here is four. So if I'm doing this for Jimmy, I'm going to put Jimmy Hernandez. So I have this on the form, the date, and then I'm going to put in when the referrals. I'm going to get the name, the phone number, what's the relationship, where do they live, and is there an alternate number? And then once we have this list, then we can go ahead and we can call these people and let them know why we're calling. We're calling in behalf of Jimmy Hernandez. We recently just updated some of his policies, and he actually listed you as an emergency contact. The reason why is that Jimmy was hoping that if something were to happen to him, if he were to pass away, or if he was critically injured or had to go into a nursing home, is that he actually has living benefits. He was hoping that you would take down my name and number and contact me if something like that were to happen. is that something you're willing to do? Of course, they're going to say yes. So then that also gives you the opportunity to ask them about any current policies that they have. You're offering a free policy review, and you can use those ERSs um, to book appointments. Also, with another great way of getting referrals is utilizing the beneficiary form. So when you're doing the beneficiary, make sure that you're getting like their name, where they live, and also get a phone number as well. Because if they're local, you may want to go see them. Lastly, you can also do the initial client satisfaction survey, and that's once I've gone through the ERS. Jimmy, before I leave, I'm required to go over this satisfaction survey just to make sure that I've covered everything with you. I just want to make sure before I leave I haven't left any stone unturned. And then you simply just read these questions. My senior advisor was courteous and very friendly. Jimmy, would you disagree, somewhat agree, or strongly agree? Two, my senior advisor was knowledgeable and very professional. Jimmy, would you disagree, somewhat agree, strongly agree? Guys, you should be getting strongly agreed on all these. My senior advisor explained thoroughly my rights and options. Disagree, somewhat agree, strongly agree. How satisfied are you with the explanation of the features and benefits of your life insurance program? Not satisfied, somewhat satisfied, very satisfied. This is for the budget. I feel the insurance program I'm applying for fits my needs and budget. Disagree, somewhat agree, strongly agree. Want to make sure that they're strongly agreeing that that benefit that they're applying for fits into their budget. If I'm doing Jimmy's program, he selected option 2, which was $121 a month, and he comes back and he gives me a little bit of hesitation. Well, I think I can give it a try. It seems a little high, but I think I can do it. I may call a timeout there and say, well, Jimmy, I'm getting the feeling here that the 121 may be stretching the budget a little bit. Let me ask you a question. Would you feel comfortable with something maybe a little bit closer to $100 a month or maybe just under? Yeah, yeah, I think I would be. I'm going to immediately go back and I'm going to revise my application right then and there versus just trying to, submit it, and then he calls me, 2 weeks later and wants to cancel the policy. So it's better to, find that out right now than to try to overcome that later. Now, last question, Jimmy. Based on your overall experience today, how likely would you be to recommend your senior advisor to a friend or family? Would you not recommend? Maybe recommend? Definitely recommend. Guys, I promise you, 100% of your clients would say, I would definitely recommend. Well, Jimmy, who would be the first person that you would want to recommend over that you think that could benefit from a program like this? Now, it could be that the person that he would recommend may be somebody on the emergency response system, or maybe not. It may be their neighbor who they know has been looking for life insurance, but they're not like super close buddies. It's not something they want on their ERS form. So it's not redundant. It's two totally separate items. So guys, with that, we're almost done with our in-home presentation. The last thing that I typically do is I do the I am your policy. This is to really consummate the deal. If you have this is a great tool. Guys, I'll just read it to you real quick, and this is how I'm going to phrase it. Jimmy, before I leave, I'd like to read this to you. This is something that one of our agents came up with, actually wrote this. And it's kind of, if your policy, if we could like wave a magic wand and make your policy come to life and it could talk, this is what it would say. It would say, I am your policy. It says, you and I have similar purposes in this world. It's your job to provide food, clothing, shelter, medicine, sundry, and other essential items for your loved ones. You do this while I lie in your desk drawer. I have faith and trust in you that out of your earnings will come the cost of my upkeep. At times I may appear to be worthless to you, but someday and who knows when you and I will change places. When you are laid to rest, I will come alive and I will do your job. I will provide the funds necessary for your final resting place and guarantee your loved ones will not be burdened. I can also provide food, clothing, shelter, medicine, and other essential items your family will continue to need, just as you are doing now. When your work is done and your afterlife begins, my work will begin. Through me, your hands will carry on, and so will your legacy. Whenever you feel the price you are paying for my upkeep is burdensome, remember that I will do more for you and your family than you can ever do for me. You do your part, I will do mine. Sincerely, your policy. And I promise you, if you read this to your clients at the end of the presentation, it will solidify the sale, and you will have clients that will break down in tears. I promise you. Many times when I've done this form, that clients are weeping at the end of the sale. I promise you, if your clients are crying at the end of your presentation, ain't no way in hell they're going to cancel the policy. Okay? So do that at the end. And then the last thing you want to do is you want to do the policy receipt. Make sure that you're getting, you're putting their name in here, the city, state. If there's a joint application, in other words, if you're doing husband and wife, I'm going to list their beneficiaries here. I'm going to do the carrier. This example, it's Transamerica plan. I usually just list like immediate whole life right there. Face amount, let's say it's this case it was 21,000. Premiums are 121 days, 121 a month. I mean, start date whenever Jimmy wanted to start to begin, and then any riders that are available. Maybe it's getting the living benefits, maybe it has the accidental, then of course agent's name and phone number, and again just reconfirm with your client, these are your premium guarantees. Here are the 5 guarantees. Now, the last thing I want to do before I exit is I want to ask Jimmy. Now, Jimmy, before I submit this application, I want you to look at me in the eyes. I want you to promise me that this $121 a month, that's a commitment for you to protect your family. I want you to promise me that that fits comfortably in your budget, and this isn't going to take any food off the table, because I don't want you coming back to me later 3 months from now and telling me you can't afford this, or I see that your policy lapses. Because let's face it, Jimmy, the only policy that matters is a policy that's in place when you pass away. So Jimmy, does this 121, does that fit comfortably into your budget? So guys, that's the pushback. It's like I'm pushing the application back and I'm saying, you tell me if this fits into your budget. From there, guys, I'm done. I'm packing up. I'm saying goodbye to my clients. Most of the time, I'm giving them a big hug. They're telling me about how awesome they feel that they've taken care of this financial burden. And from there, we wrap everything up. Jimmy, any last words that you want to comment on, or any last things before we end this extra long call? No, Jimmy might have actually dropped off the call. Well, with that, guys, I know we lost a few attendees. I told you we were going to go through this whole thing until the very end. I appreciate for those of you that did stay on to the very, very end. Hopefully, you got a lot out of this. This is a recorded webinar, so we're going to get this up on the website within a week or so. If you subscribe to our channel, we'll get it up on the channel. I hope this has been beneficial. And everybody have a great weekend, and we will talk to you soon. God bless and take care.